The Anomaly appeared in shipping lane 31 Kessler at 0411 station time on a Tuesday. Sensors read it as a sphere of warped space-time 14 kilometers across, rotating slowly, emitting nothing, reflecting nothing, and bending light around itself like a lens made of nothing at all. The Hegemony Navigational Authority issued a Class 7 evacuation advisory within the hour. 9 species cleared the corridor in 6 hours. 412 vessels, ranging from single-crew cargo skiffs to a Tesserum colony hauler carrying 19,000 passengers, reversed heading and burned for the nearest port. One vessel did not reverse heading. It was a 4-person human survey ship called the Dulcie May, registered out of Darwin Station, running on the fuel dregs of an expired mineral contract. Its transponder was 11 months past inspection. Its hull classification was serviceable. Its pilot read the evacuation advisory, looked at the charts, and said to her crew, "That one. Let us go look at that one." I was the sector overseer for lane 31 Kessler. My name is not relevant here. What is relevant is that I had managed this corridor for 11 years without a single navigational fatality, and I intended to keep that record. And there was a 4-person rust bucket turning toward the thing I had just told 400 ships to run from.
Dulcie May, confirm receipt of Advisory 77 Kessler. Evacuation is mandatory for all registered traffic. Acknowledge and reverse heading.
Yeah, we got it. Quick question, mate. Has anyone actually gone and had a look at this thing?
The advisory does not require observation. It requires evacuation.
Right. So nobody has looked at it.
Dulcie May, you are in violation of a Class 7 navigational directive. State your intention.
Our intention is to go and have a look. We reckon someone probably should.
I logged the exchange. I flagged their transponder. I forwarded their registration to the Navigational Authority for disciplinary review. And then I sat in my chair and watched their marker move toward the Anomaly at a steady 300 meters per second, which was, as far as I could tell, the maximum speed of which the Dulcie May was capable. They were not accelerating. They were already going as fast as they could. I should explain who was on that ship, not because their credentials were impressive. They were not. But because what happened next only makes sense if you understand that these were not trained anomaly researchers. They were not xenophysicists or navigational specialists or emergency surveyors. The pilot was Mac Calloway, 43, formerly of the Western Australian Geological Survey, whose qualification for deep space navigation was that he had once driven a drilling rig across 600 kilometers of desert in the dark to see what a seismograph reading looked like up close. He had not been asked to drive across the desert. He had been specifically asked not to. His co-pilot was Georgie Tsang, 31, an atmospheric chemist whose previous position had ended when she attempted to collect gas samples from a volcanic vent on Kepler 442b by walking up to it with a jar. Her professional review described her as enthusiastic beyond the scope of her safety briefing. The surveyor was Pete Malouf, 56, who had once disassembled a malfunctioning reactor coolant pump while it was running because, he said, he could not hear the fault with it switched off. And the navigator was Ronnie Kowalski, 28, who was on her first contract and who had, according to Mac, the best instinct for weird stuff I have ever seen in a person who is not actively being prosecuted. 4 humans, One ship, 11,000 credits between them. They were the least qualified crew within 500 light years to investigate a gravitational anomaly. They were also the only ones going.
Dulcie May, you are approaching the boundary. Tidal forces are registering at 0.7 standard. Your hull is rated for 0.3. Turn back.
Pete, what do you reckon about 0.7 on these frames?
There was a pause on their end. I heard someone tapping on a bulkhead.
Pete says she will be right.
Who is Pete? Is Pete a structural engineer?
Pete is a bloke who once held a fuel line together with his teeth. She will be right.
I want to be precise about what I felt at this moment. It was not admiration. It was not concern. It was contempt. I was watching 4 inadequately trained primates from a death world fly a failing ship into a gravitational distortion that every sapient species in the lane had correctly identified as something to run from, and the pilot was eating. They crossed the boundary at 0947 station time. Their transponder signal distorted, stuttered, and then dropped off my display. I logged the time. I began composing the incident report. 4 human fatalities, navigational defiance, vessel classification, debris. I will tell you what 9 hours of silence sounds like from a control station. It sounds like every protocol you have ever trusted, telling you that the thing you are watching is finished and closed and resolved. And a smaller voice underneath all of them asking, but what if they come back? I did not leave my station. I could have. My shift ended at 14:00. The relief overseer arrived at 14:03 and offered to take the console. I told him the lane was clear and there was nothing to monitor. That was true. It was also the first time in 11 years I had lied in a duty log. I stayed because I wanted to see whether the transponder would reappear. I did not expect it to reappear. I had already filed the report. But I watched the screen, and I waited. And at 18:52, 9 hours and 5 minutes after they crossed the boundary, a small amber dot stuttered back onto my display. Transponder ident, Dulcie May. Hull stress, critical. Life support, nominal. Heading, outbound. I deleted the incident report. I deleted it before I checked whether they were intact, before I confirmed their heading, before I did anything else. I deleted it because 4 people were alive, and I had already written them off. And the first thing I felt was not relief, but embarrassment. And the second thing I felt, I did not have a word for. They were inside for 9 hours. I know this because their transponder reappeared on my display at 18:52, which I also logged, along with an annotation that I later deleted, which read, "How?" What I did not know, and what their data recorder later revealed, is what they found. The interior of the anomaly was not empty. It was not a distortion, not a tear, not a hazard. It was a structure. Someone had built something inside, folded space-time 14 kilometers across, left it running, and walked away. The structures were geometric, vast intersecting arcs of solidified light, or something that behaved like light but held its shape in vacuum. They rotated slowly around a central axis that the Dulcie May's instruments could not locate. The rotation period was 41 hours. Georgie Tsang measured it by marking a feature and waiting for it to come around again. While she waited, she took 412 photographs and ran spectral analysis on everything she could point a sensor at. Pete Malouf recorded the harmonic vibrations for 9 continuous hours because, he said, it sounded like a building cooling down. How long ago the builders had walked away, the Dulcime's instruments could not determine. The structural harmonics suggested a minimum of 9,000 years. 9,000 years of something rotating in silence, in the dark, inside a fold of space-time that every species with faster-than-light capability had detected, classified as dangerous, and run from. Mac Calloway, the man who had driven across a desert to look at a seismograph, the man who had eaten a sandwich while crossing a gravitational boundary, the man who I had dismissed as an inadequately trained primate, floated in the viewport light for 6 minutes without speaking. Then he picked up the recorder and said,
Georgie, are you getting this? Tell me you are getting this.
I am getting it. Mac, I am getting all of it.
Good. Because I do not think anyone is going to believe us.
They emerged at 1852. Their hull integrity was at 61%. Their fuel reserves were at 4%. They had enough oxygen for approximately 19 hours, and the nearest port was 11 hours away at their maximum speed, which left them a margin of 8 hours and no room for the navigational error that was, statistically, certain on a ship with no inspection sticker. Mac Calloway contacted my station and said the following, which I have replayed 147 times.
Overseer, this is the Dulcime. We are back. We have 9 hours of data, including structural surveys, harmonic readings, gravitational lensing measurements, and 412 high-resolution images. We also have 17 minutes of continuous video that is going to be the most important footage recorded in this sector in the last 50 years. Requesting docking clearance, and if it is not too much trouble, a tow, because we are a bit short on fuel.
Dulcime, you are in violation of 7 navigational directives. You will be cited, fined, and your pilot's license will be reviewed.
Yeah, fair enough. Can we get that tow though? We would hate to drift into something.
The Navigational Authority convened a review board. Mac Calloway was summoned to answer for 7 violations of the evacuation directive: willful disregard of hull safety ratings, operation of an uninspected vessel in a restricted corridor, and, in the words of the formal charge, conduct incompatible with the continued safety of commercial navigation. He sat in the hearing chair, in the same flight suit he had worn inside the Anomaly. He had not changed. He had not prepared a defense. When the board asked him why he had ignored a mandatory evacuation order, he said,
Because someone had to look. That is the whole thing. Nobody was looking, so we went and looked.
The board reviewed the Dulcime's data for 4 days. On the 5th day, they dropped all 7 charges. On the 6th, the Hegemony Science Directorate classified the Anomaly as a protected site and assigned the Dulcime's crew as its first survey team, with a budget, a new hull inspection, and a directive that read, in its entirety, continue looking. I filed my incident report on the 8th day. I described the violations accurately. I described the crew accurately. I attached the navigational data and the communications log without alteration. And at the end, in the section reserved for the overseer's assessment, I wrote the following. There are 412 species in the hegemony with faster-than-light capability. Of those, every single one that detected the anomaly in lane 31 Kessler responded identically They ran, correctly, sensibly, in accordance with every protocol designed to preserve life in the presence of the unknown. Not one of them turned around. The humans brought sandwiches. I have managed this corridor for 11 years. I have logged 9,000 vessel transits. I have overseen the safe passage of 41 species through conditions ranging from solar flares to piracy to hull breach. I have never once failed to predict what a crew would do when faced with something dangerous. I did not predict this. The Dulcie returned to the Anomaly 9 days later, this time with full fuel, a functioning transponder, and a hull rated for .9 standard. Mac Calloway's first transmission on approach was addressed to my station.
Overseer, this is the Dulcie May. We are heading back in. Georgie thinks she saw something at the far end of one of the structures that she wants another look at. Also, Rani says to tell you she packed extra sandwiches in case you want to come.
I did not go. I am not built for whatever it is that makes a human look at a thing that warps light and say, "Let me go look at that one." I do not think any species is, except theirs. But I will say this. When the data from their second expedition was published, every species that had evacuated Lane 31 Kessler read it, and not one of them suggested that the Dulcie May should not have gone. Because the thing they found inside that anomaly, the thing that had been sitting there for 9,000 years waiting, was worth finding. And the only reason it was found is that 4 humans with a thermos and 11,000 credits looked at a thing the entire galaxy was running from and said, "Someone probably should." Among the structural harmonics the Dulcie May recorded, there was one frequency that did not match the anomaly. It was a resonance signature, the kind a tether makes under load, if the tether is large enough and the load is heavy enough. An engineer on a Concorde orbital elevator recognized it when the data was published. She filed it under interesting and forgot about it. 11 months later, the Concorde seized her elevator and expelled the maintenance crew. She remembered. Nobody asked who maintained it.